All right, so I want to just read something very quickly, if I can, to you. Some of you may have heard this before. Many of you probably have heard this before. Matthew chapter 28, and I was trying to figure out if I wanted to start with Acts 1:8 or Matthew chapter 28. We're just going to do Matthew 28, mainly because I love both of those, but this one is where we're starting tonight. This is Jesus' sort of last words, right, to the disciples. And he says this, he says, "All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." We do know that in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, it tells us that we've been given power, and that we are to be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and then to the ends of the earth, right? What's interesting about Acts 1:8 is I think a lot of times when we read that, we think that we're Jerusalem, and we're not. Actually, if you read that in the context of that passage there, we're the ends of the earth, right? In other words, we are here in the United States of America because as believers, because somebody took to heart what Jesus said to do. Does that make sense? Like, you are here with the gospel because somebody took to heart what Jesus said to do in Acts 1:8 and what Jesus said to do in Matthew chapter 28. And so the folks that we have with us up here today are folks that have also taken that to heart. And in Matthew chapter 28, we're really given this snapshot. Somebody says, well, why do we plant churches? Right? Why is that part of what we do? Well, it's very simple. Like, we're told in Matthew 28, ultimately, to go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I've commanded you to do. He literally gives these instructions to do these things that the church does. Does that make sense, right? Like, we know it's the church that's been given the keys of the kingdom, right? Like, you know that I've told you guys on multiple occasions that I believe in a perfect world in the New Testament. We see that the perfect model for discipleship happens within the context of the local church. Right? That's why I love our ministry so much as a BCM, because we are connected to the local church. We're a ministry of the state convention, the associations, and the local churches. And so it allows us to have this direct line back to the local churches and to get you guys in those local churches. And so so I thank you guys, all of y'all, for what you're doing. And Karsyn, I know yours in a little different context, but it still fits with this conversation tonight. And so here's what I want us to do. We've been through Esther. We're in Esther, right? We finished chapter 4 and 5. I got told, Ryan told me that Esther chapter 4 and 5 took me a long time. He said that was a really long sermon. So sorry about that, all right? Didn't mean for that to happen. That's what happens when you try to cover 2 chapters in one night. But that's kind of where we're at. And you know that if you've been a part of what we've been doing, we've been talking about like just answering this call, right? In chapter 4, it says Esther was placed there for such a time as this, right? That's what her cousin Mordecai, who had basically been functioning as her father, told her, hey, you've been put here for such a time as this. And we've talked about how that we have been placed in particular positions and settings, and that timing matters, but that God gifts us and all these different things, right, for such a time as this. And that I believe wholeheartedly that what God calls us to do is whatever place we're at in our life, is to leverage that for the gospel, because each one of those places, each one of those settings contextually can be for such a time as this, right? And so we've talked about that. And so we know from back, a month or so ago, Karsyn, I guess, there's about 20 of them that raised their hand at some point or another during that night that said that they were either for sure that God had called them into ministry or they were discerning a call into ministry, right? Isn't that number right? Did I make that up? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Ryan, she said, what's that mean? Was it 20? Or was it 19? What was it? One of the two. It was either 19 or 20. I have a list of y'all, by the way. All right? We literally have a list. We chased some of y'all down after the fact. So I know some of you, this is going to be really, really, really applicable tonight. For others of you, you may be like, well, I'm not called into ministry. I promise you, if you'll listen, this is going to be really, really, really applicable to you tonight. Because all of us have been called to fulfill Matthew chapter 28. I worked with a pastor one time that made up a word called great commissionaries. And we all laughed at him because we were like, that's not in the English language. But the concept behind it was actually really brilliant. We've all been called to become great commissionaries, to fulfill the Great Commission. right? Every single one of us. And so that's what I want you to hear tonight as we talk about that. So with that said, let's find out who these folks are up on our panel. Robbie, we'll start with you. Tell them who you are and kind of what you do.
Yeah, I am a missionary trapped in a missions pastor's body. I've tried to go so many times, and God's just kept me here and called me to send people.
All right.
I serve at 5 Points Church. We've been planted for about a year. And prior to that, I served for 10 years at Watkinsville as the missions pastor, also discipleship pastor as well. So
nice.
That's me. I have a wife. Yes, we've been married almost 25 years and 3 kids. We're enjoying a little more freedom now. We have 2 in college. One that this guy keeps trying to send both overseas and up to Boston. So we got to talk after the service. But that's a little bit of us.
That's awesome. All right. Karsyn, you're up.
My name's Karsyn. I've met most of y'all. I believe I'm looking around. Natalie's giving me a heart there in the back. Love you. So glad you're here. But I just recently graduated from UGA. My degree in psychology in December, and I was in school my last semester and working here last semester. I don't know if y'all knew that. And then I graduated, and now I'm here working with Tommy and Ryan. And yeah, I started discerning a call into ministry and then to missions, like my senior year of high school, freshman year at UGA, and BCM was a big part of that. So I've been mentored and discipled here, and that led me to working here.
And what are you doing when you finish?
When I finish here, I've started the application process for the Journeyman program with the IMB. It's a 2-year international program. I don't know where I want to go or where the Lord's going to send me, but I'll start that progress and application soon, and then hopefully that's where I'll be for 2 years after I leave in 2026.
Yeah. So, y'all got to deal with her one more year. So, yeah, go ahead.
Hey guys, my name is Chandler. I'm originally from Southeast Georgia, went to UGA for 3 years, go Dogs, and went to Prince Avenue Baptist Church right down the road. Did a residency program there, finished that up last May, and then moved to Boston, Massachusetts in August of this past year. Then got married in December, and now me and my wife are in Boston serving King Sills Church.
You said UGA 3 years, so did you quit or are you just smart?
I graduated early.
Everybody used to do 5 years, but now it's like the 3-year track. It's like you missed the extra football season, man. So go ahead, Soriah.
My name is Soriah Lott. I am from Texas and moved to Boston about 4.5 years ago. After graduating college, I serve as mobilization director at Kings Hill, which basically means missions and outreach. And yeah, I don't know. That's
good.
Kind of it.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm Pratt. I've been in Boston for about, up on 3 years. I went to the University of Georgia a long time ago.
Go Dogs, Lauren.
Go Dogs. Studied journalism, and then I did a little stint at seminary, and then I moved to Boston in 2022. And I am not in ministry full-time. I just work, I do book publicity for a publishing company. So, and then before that, when I first moved to Boston, I was working at a tech PR company. So just helping serve alongside King's Church as a person in the workplace, church member. So yeah.
So Lauren, I'm going to start with you then. The majority of this room is probably not going into full-time ministry, right? So what made you say, like, yeah, I'm gonna go to Boston? Like when you were leaving seminary and headed to Boston, like what made you go, man, I'm gonna go to Boston and work in this, or partner alongside this church plant while I work in the secular world?
Yeah, so my degree was in intercultural studies, which is just like words to say missions. So like, I knew I was considering overseas, but I never really felt like that was really where the Lord had me. And I always had this draw to North American church planting. And so just even like throughout my whole time in seminary, I would just kind of go to these interest meetings that there would be on campus, and I would just learn about different areas. I'd go on mission trips and just be like, okay, maybe Portland, Oregon, or maybe Canada or whatever. But I was always places, I would always tell people, I always felt really drawn to places outside of the South. no shade on the South, but there's just a lot of unchurched, unreached areas in places like the Northeast, Pacific Northwest, areas like that. And so I just always had like a really strong draw to those places. And so kind of towards the end of my time at seminary in North Carolina, I just started kind of thinking through that more, praying through that more, and I think the Lord just really allowed me to intersect with some people that were doing work in Boston. And so I just started having conversations and just started thinking through, like, what would it look like just to go to Boston for like a weekend and meet with pastors and meet with people in that area and just kind of see it. And there were three things that I think really drew me to the city and to the church plant, which was just, I wanted to be in a place that was really diverse, that had a lot of international students, a lot of college students was the second thing, and then, just it was really unchurched and didn't have a lot of believers. And so I ended up coming up for a weekend, crashing on Soriah's couch. And I just really fell in love with the city really quick. And I actually thought I was going to be, like, when I first was exploring Boston, I thought maybe I'd be doing full-time ministry. That was what I was like, I'm going to do college ministry. And the Lord just had other plans, and he very, very clearly and quickly opened up a door to work at a PR agency. It was like a small boutique agency with like 40 people, and I think I was the only Christian there.
Wow.
So I did that for a couple of years, and then recently I've switched over to doing some contract work, and I'm just remote. But yeah, so it's been really cool just to be in that space. It's been really stretching.
That's cool. So the rest of you right now are employed in ministry jobs per se. How did y'all figure out, like, this is what God wants me to do? Like, y'all can kind of popcorn it, do it however you want to there. Like, how did you figure out? I mean, this is how I know this is a yes. Soriah, he's looking at you, which is kind of cool because your story is kind of the opposite of Lauren's, right? So
it is
yeah,
kind of the opposite.
yeah.
So I majored in aviation logistics in college, and what that means is I wanted to work for an airline because I wanted to fly standby for free. And so I chose this really specific degree plan,
Right.
and my goal was like, all right, I lived in the Dallas area, and there's two like airline headquarters in Dallas, so I was going to graduate, I was going to work for an airline, and that was my plan. And then kind of in college, I began to get really involved in my college ministry and was like an intern at my college ministry. I was like, oh no, I really love ministry. And slowly my love for the church and my love for ministry and working in that setting grew as my desire to work in aviation shrank at the same time proportionately. And so I graduated college thinking, I'm going to go serve in a church plant in Boston, but I'm going to work full-time in aviation. And then I'll serve in the church, kind of on the side as my volunteer kind of thing. But I graduated in May 2020. And so God said no to a job in aviation real quick because all of the airlines were circling the drain during the pandemic. So I had this desire to work in ministry, but just kind of this thought like, maybe it'll happen years down the road, but I'm going to work in aviation until then. That was my plan. But as I applied for jobs and applied for jobs and applied for jobs, and the desire to like work in ministry kind of grew, the Lord made it clear. First of all, there was no way He wanted me to work in aviation, and second, that there was an opportunity to work in ministry. So shortly after I got to Boston, not even shortly, like months after I got to Boston. My pastor offered for me to support Raise and work full-time in ministry. And just through all of the doors closing and through the desire that was growing in my heart to work in ministry, I said yes to that. So
That's awesome. That's great. We'll just go down the line at this point, right? You're up, Chandler.
Yeah, so I originally came to college, coming out of high school. I was a believer, but I originally came to college wanting to make hype videos for the University of Georgia football team. Because in high
Was
school,
that really your goal?
In high school,
That's
I would
awesome.
sit at home and I would watch on like Instagram these these hype videos
Yeah.
that they would make every week, and that was the first time we had went to the national championship. It was with Nick Chubb and Sony Michelle.
Yeah.
And just remember watching that scene, I was like, I want to do this. So by God's grace, I was able to do that. Moved up here early that summer, started the summer between my senior year of high school, freshman year of college, and thought, man, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, maybe I'll get to do go work for the NFL or stick around at Georgia forever and make hype videos. But as I came to UGA, started doing that for the football team. Progressively, what had happened is I got plugged into the church, and there were men around me who started reading the Bible with me, showing me what it truly looks like to follow Jesus. And in doing so, it was like slowly the Lord just led me away from that job. And I think part of me wishes that I had been more missional in that job, more evangelistic in that job. But looking back, God had put me in the place I was at church to lead me to where I am today. So it was a lot of challenging conversations, a lot of prayerful conversations, but initially did not want to go into ministry. Well, that wasn't even on the radar.
Right.
But eventually I gotten challenged by a mentor of mine who was in ministry about if that would ever be a desire of mine. So.
Gotcha. So somebody he literally asked you, would it ever be a desire of yours?
Yeah, he did, and that was the first time anybody had ever asked me that. And
Nice.
I actually preached at my previous church growing up at youth Sundays and stuff, but never had crossed my mind that I would ever go into full-time ministry. And he asked me one day at lunch, he was like, would you ever go into ministry? And I was like, I don't know. And that started the wheels turning.
Yeah.
And then just progressively over the next several years, the Lord started working. And then I spent my summer in Boston, returning for Kings Hill. And that was really when the Lord solidified that.
That's cool. Karsyn, what you got?
Yeah, so I had been serving in a religious context for the majority of my life. So I went to a really, really small Southern Baptist church back home. I'm from Thomasville, Georgia, 15 minutes from Florida, if you don't know where it is, really south. And I was the only young person there for a very long time. And still, even now when I go visit. And so I was serving in the kids, I was serving on the worship team, anything that I could. I was also serving at a camp for the majority of my life, and this camp was very missions-focused. So I knew a ton about missionaries. I thought they were super cool, and I loved leading girls, camp counseling over the summer and everything. So I loved doing what I was doing. My mom always said that she knew that's really where I was home, was being at camp and she knew that's what I loved to do. And so she kind of always knew that I would maybe end up doing something like that in some capacity. And so I graduate high school, and I'm I really love psychology. I love people. I love learning why people do the things that they do, say the things that they say, and I just want to work in that field, maybe counseling, maybe something, I don't know. I mean, y'all know as much as I do. Who actually knows what they want to do when they come in freshman year, right? So I'm I don't know. So then I get involved with BCM, and it's September, and Confluence hits. And told me I really didn't want to go to Confluence. I don't know if you know this story. I really didn't want to go, and some of y'all freshmen probably know why I didn't want to go, and it was because I had all the football tickets, all the home games.
Oh, it was on a home game that year?
It was on a home game.
That's terrible. I'm sorry.
And
I'm sorry.
So mad because the paint line left and went and came back.
Yes,
And,
they did. Yeah.
I couldn't do that because I drove, and anyways, I had a ton of girls in my car. And I was I won't do that. But I ended up going, but I really didn't want to go.
Right.
And I literally sat down with Allie and Heather, two of the campus missionaries at that point. And I was guys, I really don't want to go to Confluence. And they're Karsyn, it's just a conference. Why is it such a big deal? And looking back, I realized that something amazing was going to happen at Confluence, and Satan was trying to keep me from that. And so at Confluence, at one of the sessions, I'm having a breakdown because I'm realizing that the Lord is calling me into ministry in whatever capacity and possibly missions. And that was really, really scary to me because it meant that I had to surrender whatever my plans were, even though my plans were unknown. But it meant that I had to surrender that uncertainty and that unknown.
But you had a good plan.
I did have a good plan.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Like you were going to do the whole double doll thing or whatever it's called, right? Whatever that thing was.
So I come with a lot of credits, right? And I was supposed to get my master's in HDFS, Human Development Family Science. And I was going to get that and my undergrad in 4 years. And that's what I really wanted. And that's the whole reason I was at UGA. So that's why I was having this breakdown of Confluence, because I was like, Lord, like, I will drop out of UGA if that's what you want me to do. Like, at this point, if I'm supposed to go to missions, I'll go to Bible college, I'll I don't need, who needs a degree, Like, why are we even here?
You do need a degree. Don't listen to that.
No, listen to me.
Sorry.
If that's what the Lord tells you to do. So, I really was struggling, and we had like a big break in the middle of Confluence, and people are coming up to me. I'm in the corner, like, praying and journaling and, like, trying to figure out what the Lord wants me to do in my life, and people are coming asking me, okay, I'm fine, I just need to be alone. So there were these missionaries there, IMD missionaries. They had secret names, so they couldn't tell you their name. They had fake names. And then I was in a breakout session with them, and some photographers came in taking pictures, like, to promote Confluence, whatever. And they had to step out of the room because there couldn't be any pictures. And they were somewhere in Africa, that's all I know. As well as they could tell us. But I remember seeing them and being like, whoa, these are real live missionaries. Like, in my mind, they were celebrities. They really were. Like, I had never met any of them before. These are the people I was learning about, like, at camp all those years, at PBS all those years, It's like, wow, they're so cool. Like, I want to talk to them. And so during this break at Confluence, I'm like, okay, Lord, like, I'm going to go talk to them. And maybe they can give me some answers on what I'm supposed to do. And they weren't there. They weren't there. They weren't at the table like they said they would be. The IMD table was empty. No one was there talking to me. I was like, great, So I went back, and I'm praying some more. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go back. It was like 15 minutes later, I'm going to go back, whatever. They weren't there again. And so I was like, okay, God, well, you know what? I really want to talk to them. And if you want me to talk to them, I need you to put them there. Because we had like 20 minutes left of our break. And so last 20 minutes, I go up there. They're there with all of their like 5 adopted kids running around, her and her husband. And so I end up talking to the wife, and I'm like, okay, this is my crisis. I've never been out of the country. I've never even been on a mission trip before because my parents wouldn't let me growing up. And I don't know why I feel like this, but I'm willing to go. I'm not even afraid of it or anything. Like, I just want to go. I want to share Jesus with people. And she's like, can you come live with us right now? I was like, no, I can't do that. But no, legitimately, I was telling her my plan, right, to get my master's and get my psych degree. And I was like, I need to know if this is where the Lord wants me or if he wants to do something else. So can I use this degree that I want to get, this plan that I'm interested in, fascinated, I love learning, I love these classes, right? Can I use this on the mission field? If not, if you tell me no, like, we'll figure something out. But if you tell me yes, this is where I'll stay. I know that the Lord has me here for a reason, right? And she just spouts off like 5 different ways that she knows missionaries on the field that are using like psychology degrees or psychology type counseling programs, whatever, all these different, the things that I studied at school, I could use this on the mission field. I was like, okay, well that's reassuring, I'm here where I'm supposed to be. And so that really was it at that point. I was like, okay, well, I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm here where the Lord wants me to be. And I ended up getting some sense knocked into me a year later in last January that I didn't need my master's here. I just pridefully wanted a master's degree from the University of Georgia. That I didn't need it because I would end up going to seminary for missions anyways. And so I graduated super early because I had all my classes done.
And where all have you now, since you put your yes on the table, where all have you now been?
Yeah, so my first summer after freshman year, I went to Guatemala, worked with an IMD family there for 3 weeks. And then the next summer, which was last summer, I went to Norway, worked with an IMD family there for 6 weeks. I've also went to Guatemala with BCM for spring break.
And then where are you going this summer?
This summer, I will be going to London for another 6 weeks with IMD.
Yeah, so you've never been anywhere. And then you're like, all right, yes, and now you travel the world all the time. So, yeah. Robbie, what about you, man?
Yeah, so what was the question? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
I feel like my journey, I've been a pastor for 18 years, 19 years. And I would say I've been constantly running like from ministry, essentially.
Right.
I'm still running, like God keeps me there.
Right.
And my journey to, like I'm turning 50 this week, so my journey would be like, there's a lot more ground to cover than these guys. They're so young and beautiful. But anyhow, my journey has been that of God planting seeds over and over again to just draw me back into this idea of ministry.
Right.
Or being called into like the ministry that I'm in today. Every time he planted that seed, I was not in Georgia. So Georgia's basically where I've grown up my whole life.
Right.
I've traveled all over the world just with the blessing of being a missions pastor. But I was never in Georgia. Like the first time in high school, felt like I was at a youth conference and our senior pastor was there and he talked about being called to ministry, planted a seed there. I ran from it. And then a few years later, I was in Africa, and this was like 2006. I think we had like a satellite phone back then. We didn't have the fancy technology today. I don't know how we didn't talk, but we called back home to our home church that sent us, and the pastor there, he was like, Robbie, we've been praying about like getting an associate pastor. God put you on my heart. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it when we get back. We're on a mission trip right now. So kind of ran from that. And then actually went into bivocational ministry after that. Okay. That was a horrible experience. This is exactly what they want to hear. That was a really rough experience. We came to Watkinsville First Baptist, really broken from ministry experience like that. And 3 years later, I was leading a team. God had opened up a door for me to like start a ministry in Africa and Uganda. And so I was leading a mission team back over to Uganda. And on that trip, David Holt, who's pastor at Living Hope, he was on that trip with me. And he said, hey, I feel led to go plant a church. Would you consider, like, can I recommend you to Carlos about, like, being my replacement here at Watkinsville? And so I was like, let's concentrate on the mission. We were in Africa when he said it. Let's concentrate on the mission. And then kind of ran from that. I was like, ministry is not for me. And God led me to the staff there at Watkinsville. And then for 5 Points, we were in San Francisco at a church planting conference. And that time I was excited. I said, yeah, I'll do it. You know,
So this is the only one you've been excited about.
Yeah, that's it. 5 Points, only one. I'm actually like, right now, I don't know if you know this, Tommy, but right now I'm 20 hours a week at 5 Points Church, serving on staff there. And I'm also the operator at Batty's Burgers and 5 Points. And so it was a big step of faith.
Hey, shout out. Batty's Burgers is the real deal, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
And God
Sorry.
called me to do something like that. Like my experience in the restaurant business is I delivered like Philly cheesesteaks in college. That was my experience in the restaurant business. So like he's put me in the heart of the community and city that we planted.
So I want to follow that up because like there's certain churches around the state of Georgia that like most guys that don't work at them are like, man, I would just love to work at one of those places. You know what I'm saying? I mean, typically some of your larger churches, some of your mega churches, like that kind of setting is typically those type of churches. And I mean, I get phone calls from guys who I know who are outside of this area that are like, hey, if Prince or Waddy ever has a job, let me know. Like, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, it's not really how Carlos works, but okay. You know what I mean? Like, and so, like, you left that to plant. Like, I know you said you were excited, but can you, like, share, like, why?
Yeah, my wife wasn't so excited. I mean, dream job, missions pastor at Watkinsville.
Yeah.
I traveled, like, throughout the year. I've been to Boston probably 100 times, like, literally going back to probably 10, 11 years ago. And it's like, it was such a great job.
Right.
But God made it clear that we were to come to 5 Points. And Joel Chimo, the senior pastor there, he's the full-time staff, like full-time guy. And then there's a couple other of us that work part-time there. And we knew that going in. So like, God, you just got to provide in a different way. And he's done that.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if you're going to talk about why 5 Points or why.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. You go ahead, go with it. Yeah, absolutely.
And so this is, I was like thinking about like just over and over again, all the many decisions that like God has led us through over our lives. There's always an acronym that's helpful, right? This one's not like real sexy or whatever, but maybe it'll be easy to remember. DDAC, so DDAC is like the way I frame it.
Right.
But essentially, like, what I would tell you guys is you like pray through this very important like season of your life, transitional season in your life. For me, the first D would be like your devotion. So like, if you're not abiding in Christ and walking like wholeheartedly after Him, following Him wholeheartedly, like you're never going to hear from Him. Like
Right.
you're not going to know His will for your life. And so like, run after Jesus like with all your heart. And then the second D would just be desire. A lot of these guys have talked about this desire, and so God like continued to put desire for like missions. He didn't like open that door. Essentially, I just was a sender, not a goer.
Right.
But He put that desire in my heart. So listen to that. I think we discount that sometimes. Like, man, if I'm following Christ and following Him like with all my heart, and that desire's there, listen to that, because not everyone has that desire to go or to go plant a church or whatever. So listen to that. A would just be affirmation from your community, your church. Like, make sure people are affirming that in you. And then, what I say, C, confirmation.
Yes.
So this one is huge. Like, sometimes we look for the writing in the sky and like, God, you got to show me. All those other things are in place. As you begin to take those steps of faith, God will confirm it as you go. And so go on a summer mission trip. Go spend a summer with a church plant, like, and learn what church planting is like. And through those experiences, God will like clearly speak, and He'll confirm it, like those next steps of what He's calling to. So that's what He did for me and my wife. She cried a little bit more than I did, but as we said yes to 5 points and to come do this here in the city.
No, that's good. When I left Beach Haven to come here at the BCM, it was hard because like we had just, now it's been great because God's blessed and like He's allowed me to even kind of see through some of it, but like I just started a church plant in Guatemala, right? Because I just started that previous year or 2 years before that doing missions as well. So I was doing student college and missions, and so very similar situation. Like Beach Haven takes care of their staff tremendously and all this good stuff, and it was like, why would you leave? Like what is, it doesn't make any sense. But it was just very clear that God was like, go down the street to the campus, like go, you know.
He speaks loudly.
Oh yeah.
Loudly when you go.
Oh, absolutely. So, Boston. Why Boston?
Yeah, so Robbie could probably recite this whole thing that we have about Boston, but he's heard it 100 times. But
He's probably told some of his church people it, right? Like,
When you think about the major cities of the world, and this is one of the things that gripped me, because similar to both Lauren and Soriah, when I was discerning the call to ministry post my apprenticeship at Prince, it was, where's there a need, and where are there college students? Because God really grew my faith a ton in college, and I really have a heart for college ministry. And so just thinking about God, where is a strategic place for college ministry? Boston really is kind of one of the main cities, and the reason being, when you think about the major cities of the world, you think about New York City, you think about it as the business capital of the world, or the financial capital of the world, right? If Wall Street has a good day, then the economy has a good day, right? When you think about the political capital of the world, you think about D.C., right? Whoever's in office, Republican or Democrat, if they set the agenda, the rest of the world will tend to follow suit. But then you have Boston, and we really look at Boston as kind of the cultural capital of the world. And how do I say that? Well, you've got several different influences going on in Boston. Across the river in Cambridge, you have probably in a square mile, they'll call it the most innovative square mile in the world in biotech. There is a large amount of colleges and universities. I think last statistic, 40 plus, over 100,000 college students just in the city, in the greater Boston area. And from these colleges and universities, Harvard, MIT, Northeastern, you have people going into the secular workplace all across the globe, going overseas, but also I think this last stat is a third of U.S. Supreme Court justices, a third of world leaders come through Boston. And if you really think about, some of these other major cities, they usually have one of those things. Boston's got like 10, okay? Because really it is the cultural capital of the world. And when you think about, where would the Apostle Paul plant a church? You read the New Testament, you read about places like Ephesus and Philippi and Colossae. Like these places were epicenters for the ancient world. These were cities where there was a lot of cultural impact. And so if we really want to see the world impacted for Jesus, if we want to be a Matthew 28 people, if we want to see the gospel go forward to all nations, all nations are right there in Boston. And so we have an opportunity to reach them.
That's cool. That's awesome. Let me ask you a question, and any of y'all can jump onto this. I've heard like multiple times this idea of, it's been clear kind of in all of your stories. And it's funny, Robbie, you and I are the two old guys up here, and I think both of us were the ones that people would look at our lives based on what you just said and be like, yeah, you kind of run from the ministry calling. Like I did teaching and coaching for a long time, right? And did bivocational things. Like, I don't want to do that yet. But anyways, all four of you especially, like it was been very clear in like the stories you shared that you like kind of just put your yes on the table. And it's unique hearing like, I'm going to go into full-time ministry, and then that's not necessarily what happened. And then like, I'm going to go into like the secular world, and then that's not necessarily what happened. And then you just want to make videos. Right? And I mean, that's win national championships and make videos. And then Karsyn, even your, like the fact that you were doing all that stuff as a kid, like, and just kind of growing over time or whatever. If there's a student here that's like, man, I think I'm really discerning a call in the ministry, or I'm discerning like going and helping with a church plant. I mean, I know like when you guys got started, we had a couple of students that like, because we were talking to them about 5 points on, we had a couple of students. I think Josiah is actually taking a test today. I don't see him in the room. He's always taking a test, I think. But like he was like, I think I want to go help them, And it was like, so there may be even some that are in the room like, I could see myself living in Boston when I graduate, or I think I want to right now, because like you can go help 5 points now and then help Boston when you graduate, right? That's kind of a nice 1-2 punch.
Josiah's going to Boston this weekend, by the way.
Exactly. See, Josiah's going to Boston. Yes. And
a few in the room.
If you're at this place where you're like, yeah, I think this is what I want to do. Maybe it's full-time ministry, maybe it's missions, maybe it's pastoring, whatever. What's the best advice you could give them for like, what's the next thing you do?
Sorry, I had to farm for a mic.
It's all right, you're good.
I did not go into college knowing, first of all, that I would love ministry. I didn't go into college knowing that I would want to share the gospel all the time. I thought that was the scariest thing in the world. I didn't know, I had never been to Boston, I had never been to the Northeast, I knew nothing about it. I didn't know what church planting was. So the fact that I moved to Boston to serve in a church plant and help people share the gospel had to be like a really great work that the Lord had to do in my life, but it did not happen overnight. So I think if you asked freshman year Soriah, hey, Soriah, will you move across the country and serve in a church plant after graduation, yes or no? She'd be like, no,
right.
That's the weirdest thing that you could ever say to me. But what ultimately led to that really big yes was a lot of little yeses. So my freshman year, I was asked to go on a spring break trip to go share the gospel to drunk college students in Panama City Beach, Florida.
Beach Reach.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did Beach Reach, all 4 years of college, and had never done anything like that.
I'm going to have to ask you later if you know Jared Gregory.
Do I know Jared Gregory?
He's my dude. He's 8 foot tall, but yeah. We were in London together.
No way.
Yeah.
Jared's my college pastor.
Yeah, well, when you said North Texas, that should have connected. Yes. Sorry. Did he take you to Beach Reach?
He took me to Beach Reach, yeah.
This is great. He loves Beach Reach. Continue. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Small
This is a
world
moment.
like
I
this.
apologize. This is
God
great.
bless Jared Gregory.
Yes.
So,
This is a moment.
I'm
going to tag him on Facebook when I post it. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
He's my homie.
Yeah.
Anyways, so we I went to Beach Reach and was like, whoa, I got to share the gospel for the first time in my life. And it was kind of scary at first, but then it got really fun and really exciting. And it was cool to see the Lord work in other people's lives. And I was also struck by the lostness that I saw for the first time. So it created in me like an excitement around evangelism and like a burden for the lost. So then when I eventually in college heard that there was like church planting happening, I was like, I don't know what that is. Let me look into it. And then I learned that there's lostness in North America. News to me, I always thought that this was a Christian country and we all heard the gospel somehow, some way. And I was actually checking out a church plant in Michigan, and come to find out, like, there are not a ton of churches there. There are a lot of people who have never heard the gospel, or they think that Jesus is like a good guy who lived a long time ago and has no relevance for their life now. Right. And that broke my heart. And so, and that was like a little yes to even just checking out what even is church planting. So then when, my life kind of turned upside down in like a matter of a year, and I had to evaluate, like, what am I going to do after college? I had a burden for the lost, an excitement for ministry, and like some knowledge about church planting that compelled me to want to go. So it kind of, all of these little yeses kind of teed me up for one more little yes, which was yes to Boston. And that seems like a big yes, but it really wasn't.
Because you'd already been saying yes to ministry opportunities. That's awesome. Lauren, what are you reading right now?
Oh, man.
I can't help it. I got.
I was like, this is all I can think about. So I'm reading the book, Just Do Something.
Hey, have y'all ever heard of that? Sorry, go ahead.
No, that was one of the things that was coming to my mind is, just do something, first of all. But,
just do something, please.
But for real, like, I think one of the things that has been really helpful about that book to me is in it he talks about how, like, 1 Thessalonians 4:3 says, like, this is the will of God, it's your sanctification. Mm-hmm. So, like, what is going to help me grow in holiness? Like, what's going to help me grow closer to the Lord? And there might be something here that God is calling you to do, but it also may be, like, saying yes to a place like Boston, or going on a short-term mission trip, or, like, one of those yeses. And so I think that's just something that I think is really helpful to think about. And just like, what are the gifts and the talents that, like, the Lord has given you that you can use to serve others, and potentially serve in an area that fewer people know the gospel, and you've been given, like, such good news to share. Yeah, I would say that, and also I think along with, like, the sanctification piece, I will say, like, I'm calling out my own sin here, but it's easy to also get really excited and then kind of have, like, a savior mentality, like, I'm going to go to Boston and I'm going to, like, save these people.
Yeah.
I just realized that, like, when I moved to Boston, I had a lot of pride in feeling like I was really needed. And, like, yes, there is a need, but, like, the Lord does the work. And so it really is, like, ultimately about, like, how's he going to grow you and stretch you through that process and, like, help you know him more. And so, like, letting that be the aim of your decision, not just, I don't know, for lack of a better phrase, like, savior complex.
Right.
So that's kind of my thoughts.
No, that's a good word. Chandler, you're getting ready. I see it.
One I would say, as far as advice goes, hang around guys like Robbie, because I think everything I'm about to say is just kind of verbatim something he said earlier, just in story form. But for me, I read Just Do Something early on in college, but I guess it didn't click for me. So if you're like a freshman or sophomore in the room and you're reading this book in y'all's groups right now, actually soak it in. But when I got to the end of my apprenticeship program at Prince, the pastor's Prince started asking me, what are you going to do after this? Because you can't really stay here. And I was like, I don't know. And a few years prior, when I'd spent my summer in Boston doing an internship similar to the one that we're talking about tonight, the pastor at Kings Hill had asked me, he said, what's the chance you would ever move to Boston? And I looked at him that summer and I said, 1%. Clearly, that worked out. He said, he in his mind, he goes, so you're telling me there's a chance? But that coming out of that summer, I, by God's grace, was plugged into a church surrounded by faithful men who really challenged me. Because at the end of the apprenticeship, I did not want to go to Boston. So similar to other stories, like it wasn't like Boston was my first choice to want to go. I'm a Southern boy from Blackshear, Georgia. Like Boston is not my landscape, right? But just through being a part of the church, I was challenged by some of the pastors at Prince. They asked me, what's your, actually Lauren's dad, what's your like issue with going to Boston? Why not Boston? Because it continued to come up time and time again in my story. And I had looked at Sky and I said, well, really, Sky, it's really a problem of desire, to kind of lead into one of the 4 things that Robbie said. So Sky looks at me and says, why do you say it's a desire problem? And I said, well, 1, it's going to cost a lot of money to live in Boston.
Right.
2, if I'm going to go on staff, I have to support raise. 3, I'm leaving my community here at Prince that I've been a part of for 5 years. I start listing off all these things. And Sky just looks at me in his pastoral way, and he says, Chandler, that doesn't sound much like a desire problem. That sounds a whole lot more like a trust problem. He said, and when he said that, my prayers changed from God, help me to desire to move to Boston, to God, help me to trust you. Because all these things that I like kind of put in my way of moving to Boston, they were really just trust issues with the Lord. And so once my prayers changed to God, help me to trust you, I was ready to go. And so that same week I committed to Boston and haven't regretted it since, just because of that one conversation. And so all this to say, my encouragement, my advice would be get plugged into a local church, stay plugged into that local church, surround yourself by older, seasoned saints who love the Lord and who have gone through decisions like these and able to walk alongside you in that, and just really be entrenched in God's word while you're there.
That's good. Robbie, let me ask you a question. So you've had a lot of ministry experience, different settings, etc. As you kind of look back, and what would you say is, just give me some of the most rewarding, maybe 1 or 2 like most rewarding things that just come out of being in ministry.
I'll start with 1, and I'll see if God gives me another.
All right, no worries.
I think it's with my journey in discerning these things, it's been people.
Okay.
And then the reward has also been people.
That's good.
When you see like just the stories here of the small yeses, like seeing people take those little baby steps of faith and saying yes to the Lord, and just seeing God wreck their life with who He is first and foremost, His heart for the nations, and then and for the world. Like it's just, that's the most rewarding thing I think for me in ministry.
Right.
There's certainly challenges. There's certainly like sad, hard stories.
Right.
But God is a God who transforms.
That's right.
He transforms us, and we're going through Philippians right now. He who began a good work in you will complete it at the day of Jesus Christ. And so there's a promise there. And we just get to sit back in ministry and see God work. Like that. And that's just so rewarding.
Yeah. That's a good word. So my dad, he's been pastoring a really, really long time now. And he always tells the staff, and I worked for him at one point, and he's like, we're in the people business. Like, we're in the people business. And I think there's something to that, because there are hard times. There's hard times. There's times where your heart breaks. There's times where you see people make poor decisions. There's times where you see sin and the ugliness of it. But then there's times where you see just God change a person completely, and you're like, man, that's okay. This is why we do what we do, right? Like we get to make an eternal impact we get to make an eternal impact. Not just an impact on somebody's pocketbook for a little while, right? Not that that's, hey, y'all can make it, y'all figure out whatever job you're going to do. If you can make an impact on my pocketbook, I'll take it, right? Right? But like, but it's more than that. Like, it's so much more than that. It's this eternal impact. So, I'm going to open the floor, if I can, for just literally, we'll take the next 8 minutes. Do you guys got any questions for any of them? We'll open the floor and give you an opportunity to ask those. You can literally just raise your hand, and we'll come to you, or just point you out. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's a great question.
That is a really good question. Yeah, it was challenging. I'm kind of trying to think of like how to answer it. I think some of it was, so part of this is like a logistical thing, because I was like half remote, half in the office. And so I wasn't seeing all of those people all the time. So I kind of had to like narrow down like who are the people that I see the most consistently in the office, or at least feel like the Lord is giving me like a really good connection with, that I want to try to like build on that. And so I kind of had to try and like narrow that down as I was getting to know people. And so I think part of that was just like being intentional to like get lunch with people outside of like or like if they were at the office, like getting lunch with them, grabbing coffee, taking breaks with them in that way, or even just like planning it in advance, like, hey, I'm going to go into the office on Tuesday. Why don't we go get lunch that day? And so I think some of it was just like the intentionality to even do something outside of a work thing, like just we're working on a project together. But also like being very intentional with the opportunities that God would give me in those conversations, like, and also being expectant, because I think there were times where I would pray, like, Lord, I'm going into the office today, like, would you give me an opportunity? And then he would, and I would be surprised, which was very convicting, like, oh, the Lord answers prayers, shock. Because I do remember this one time that I was getting lunch with one of my managers, and I had like prayed that driving in, and then as we were like over lunch, we were talking about like something not even related to church initially, but it kind of connected to church, and she started asking like, oh, like what does your church believe? Like, what is a Baptist church? Like, how's that different? I've grown up in like the Universalist church, and so it was like, oh, okay, now we're talking about that. So like, I think just that like expectancy, like really just like soaking that in prayer, but also being intentional to like look for the people that God is placing in your path in the workplace. Because I do think some of it is like he gives us connection with people and relatability with people in other ways that we can build on and build towards like sharing the gospel with them. So
that's good. Anybody else? Yes.
How do you discern whether or not to go to seminary?
Ooh, boy, that's...
Isn't that TBD? Aren't you guys having a seminary guy?
Yeah, come back, and Jamie Dew's here, Dr. Jamie Dew, he'll tell you that. He'll tell you should always go is what he'll tell you, right? But
Every seminary president tells you to go to seminary.
That's right, they all say go to seminary. Yeah, who wants to answer that?
Good question. I would say for me, and seminary's not for everyone. Like there have been very faithful, godly pastors and people in ministry in general who have not gone to seminary. For me, it's been tremendously helpful. I think the best way to describe it is a lot of the theology and doctrine and stuff you could really learn outside of seminary, sure, but seminary just kind of gives you this really targeted time to learn how to kind of think about the Bible, about the church, about God, and about His Word. So, I would say it kind of gives you a targeted time to think about those things.
Yeah, and you didn't ask me this, you asked them this, but I'll say this. what I would tell any of you is this, is that you should always be desiring to learn more about God's word and who he is, right? Like that should always be a desire of our heart as a believer, right? Like, and so with that in mind, for some, particularly like if you know you're going into full-time missions or ministry, like that makes sense to be the next step, right? For others, it may not. But regardless of whether you're going to seminary or not, like there should be within us as believers, like as part of that process, sanctification, becoming more like Christ, is knowing more about who he is, right? And what his word says. So it's a good question. I don't know that we fully answered it, but Soriah has a great answer.
Sorry, no.
She's got a good one.
I might have an answer that might ruffle feathers. Honestly, I started seminary and didn't finish. Partially because I didn't know I was going to go into ministry when I graduated college. Yeah. If I would have known that, I probably would have gone into seminary straight after college. But I had already been like living and working in ministry, in Boston for some time, and was working in full-time ministry, and was thinking like, oh, if I'm going to keep working in ministry, I should probably go to seminary. To me, it was like 1 + 1 = 2.
Right.
And so I started taking classes online. But honestly, I was really overwhelmed with the amount of work. And that's just me as a student. Like, I would like to put that out there. I am not a hardworking student. And I really wanted to work hard in seminary. And it just, didn't click. And I ended up spending a lot of time on it and a lot of stress and a lot of energy on it that I realized, towards the end, was taking away from the ministry that I was already doing. Mm-hmm. And so, in effect, it was like, I can learn a lot of this stuff in other ways. And especially for the specific role that I'm in and in the specific context that I'm in, it actually makes more sense for me to just serve.
I would add to that, if you are going to seminary, it used to be, if you're going to seminary and you're going to full-time ministry, well, you got to get an MDiv. That's what everybody said. You got to get an MDiv. And that's changing. That's legitimately changing. And some of that depends on your context of your ministry experience and all those different other kind of things. But it's not so much cookie cutter where every single pastor you meet and every single person that you meet that's in ministry at a local church has an MDiv. That's not necessarily the case anymore. Partially because they take forever to get, right? And partially because you have Greek and Hebrew that you have to take. So even for those going to seminary, it's not as cookie cutter as it once was. Another question. Yes.
For Laura, how were you able to discern that you weren't being called into full-time ministry, but you were still discerning the call to work in ministry and stuff?
Not vocational ministry, but just serving in the church. Honestly, I think part of it was I guess initially coming to Boston, I would say I couldn't help but notice how clearly God was opening the door. It wasn't something I naturally would have chosen for myself. And so the fact that he kept opening up doors for interviews and talking with these people, I think I just could sense that he was leading me into that space. But even after I was working there, I still was kind of wrestling with that, honestly, of I still kind of want to do ministry. Is it possible? And I think I could just see the ways that I think even in my best efforts, it's kind of hard to say it exactly how, flush it out exactly, but I could just tell that even as I would seek to do that in my own power, he just was closing those doors. He was making it very clear, I'm not really opening that up for you right now. I want you here. And so I really kind of felt especially for the first couple years in Boston, he was really wanting to teach me endurance and steadfastness, even in something that maybe I would not have naturally chosen for myself. And it was something I don't think I was going to learn it the same way, maybe doing ministry full-time. And that's not a knock on being in full-time ministry. I think it was just what he was wanting to teach me. So that's kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, as I listened to you guys share your stories tonight, one of the things that just kept going through my mind So I'm really glad you asked that question, because one of the things that kept going through my mind was, for each of you, there were like very clear open doors and closed doors. And it wasn't that you gave, I think sometimes, and you guys probably feel this way sometimes, like when you're like, okay, this is what I got to know I got to do in my career, right? This is what I got to know I got to do with grad school. This is what I got to know I got to do with seminary. This is what I know I got to do with full-time ministry, et cetera. And it's like a very clear, like, it's going to either be a yes or no, and this is what's going to happen. As your campus minister, what I would say, even as we kind of wrap this up, is that a lot of times you're not going to know. And the burden on you from God and from Christ to follow him is not that you know. That's not the burden. The burden is that you're willing. The burden is that you put your yes on the table, right? That's the burden. That's the call. Like the call, like, hey, how do we answer the call? Well, you say yes. It's yes to God, whatever it is that you call me to do. And if you say yes on the front end, if you work from a place of yes, then doors are going to open and doors are going to close. And as doors open and doors close, it's going to be very clear to you once you get there, okay, this is how I got here, right? This is how I got here. And so I think that would be my encouragement to all of you as we heard this tonight, is like, how do I know that God's calling me? Like, how do I respond to that? What about these cool opportunities in Boston, at 5 Points, on International Mission Field, et cetera? Put your yes on the table and seek out opportunities. And as you seek those opportunities out, sometimes God's going to close doors and sometimes God's going to open doors. And when he opens doors, you walk through them, right? You walk through them. Do y'all remember back a few weeks ago, it's probably a month or so ago, I was referencing a sermon that I had heard literally like the Sunday night before at my dad's church. They had a guest speaker in, and he was talking about how that when Paul wanted to go one direction, like, and God was like, nope, right? And the passage in there says, and I'm forgetting the chapter and verse off the top of my head in Acts, but it talks about how that there was an internal factor that was stopping Paul, like clearly this piece that this isn't where I'm supposed to go. But then like the second time it talks about it, there was an external factor, right? That was like clearly something was preventing Paul from going there. And then where did Paul end up? Paul had a vision. He ended up in Philippi, right? He ended up in Philippi. If Paul tries to force a door open and go where God clearly wasn't allowing him to go at that point in time, like, we may not have the book of Philippians. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, he goes to Philippi, Lydia gets saved, the Philippian jailer gets saved, right? His family gets saved, and you literally have the beginnings of a church plant that literally we have a book in the Bible about later, right? And so it was Paul understanding that there are doors that shut and that there are doors that open, and you follow the doors that open. And if you're being obedient to God and you're doing what he's calling you to do, as you're being made and conformed to look more like him through that process of sanctification, what's going to happen is you're going to end up where God wants you. You're going to end up where God wants you. So for the 20 of you guys, and I don't know if you're all in the room tonight or not, but for the 20 of you guys that said, hey, I think I'm discerning a call in ministry, or I know that God's calling me to ministry or missions, what I would say is if you're already at that point where you're sort of feeling some of that desire, right, to that, then put your yes on the table, and when you get opportunities where doors open for ministry, step through them. Step through them. See where God leads, right? Like if you say, hey, I think I'm discerning a call in ministry, or hey, I know God's called me to ministry, and then you get like 4 ministry opportunities, you say no to all of them, you're probably just being disobedient or dumb, one of the two. Like, you get what I'm saying, right? Put your yes and follow when those doors open. And what will happen is, man, that acrostic you use, that's good. Like, it'll become very clear. It'll become very clear.